Hey everyone, welcome to Encounters USA. If it's aliens, UFOs, Bigfoot, or Dogman you're looking for, you came to the right place. Now listen up as we listen to some of the latest encounters.
Welcome to Encounters USA. This is Barbara.
And I'm Matt.
This is a paranormal podcast where we treat Bigfoot, Dogman, and alien phenomenon as part of the same mystery. We're available on iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, and on video format on YouTube. Encounters USA wants to remind you, if you have an encounter with Bigfoot, a Dogman, or an alien, or UFO, and you wish to share your experience, please contact us at encountersusa1@gmail.com. If you would like information on past or upcoming shows, please visit our website at encountersusa.com for all of the latest in research, podcasts, and encounters information.
Thank you, Barbara. Today, we're going to be talking about UFO hotspots. Because this topic is so broad, we felt we would not have time to deal with the subject and the hotspots adequately in just one podcast. Therefore, we will start with Egypt today and work our way to Mount Shasta, the Hudson Valley, the Bridgewater Triangle, and finally stop off in Washington State. We have no idea whatsoever how long it will take us to get through all of these hotspots, so please keep checking the show calendar on the homepage at encountersusa.com. We're also proud to once again have our guest Alysia Farmer sitting with us to give us some of her insights and feelings about our topic today, the pyramids, portals, Egypt, Bigfoot, and Dogman. Alysia is a spiritual coach, and she does psychic readings. So, Alysia Farmer, welcome to Encounters USA. You want to tell our listeners a little bit about Alysia Farmer?
Yeah, thank you for having me back, Matt. I am a spiritual coach. I do psychic readings. I'm a history buff. I know a lot about Egypt, and I'm just happy to be here.
All right. I like that history buff part. So, Alysia, the last podcast you were on, we're going to talk about it a little bit, but we started to get some interference, and I want to apologize to our listeners. We found out what the problem was, and the problem was, and this is absolutely not an endorsement for Apple, but I was wearing AirPods, and I was getting all of this feedback into my microphone. But Alysia, you seem to think that there was something else involved, and so we're going to talk about that after we get done talking about viewer comments. So did we get any viewer comments this week, Barbara?
Let me check. Hold on one second. Well, it looks like you got one comment, Matt.
Okay, well, before we go into the comments we got last week on our podcast about, what was our podcast last week about, Barbara?
Our podcast, it was about the Skinwalker Ranch.
That's right. It was a Skinwalker Ranch. And we got some feedback about that. And we'd also like to just take the time to encourage our viewers in order for us to know what content you want to hear, see, and listen to. Go ahead and just leave us comments on YouTube. And you can also do the same on the iTunes podcast. So, do you have those comments from last week, Barbara?
Yes. So I have one from Lynn M. to you, Matt. Cold or what? And then I have Ashley Matthews. Love this. I can't wait for the next podcast. Officially Hooked. Love y'all. And then I have one from Crystal, Canada. Don't worry about Barbara and Alysia and Folk. I'll keep them safe, Matt.
Ah, yes, the Folk Festival. Or the Folk Bigfoot Festival. I should be careful about how I phrase that. So we're certainly going to be talking about that in a minute. But yeah, I guess we're going to have to go back to. I get a comment every now and then. Actually, I think I've got a comment on every podcast from one of my devoted listeners from my other channel, and she asked me if I was cold or what. And I believe that's in reference to the fact that I was wearing a sweater. Now, it is May in Washington State, and it is still pretty chilly. So it was a requirement that day that I wear that sweater, and also I wanted to look stylish and leave a good first impression.
Okay.
So, all right, let's go ahead, and I think we're going to go and talk about upcoming events. And the thing that I think we should focus on now, because it's really getting close, and we have 2 out of 3 people on this podcast that are going to be attending it. It is the Folk Festival, yes?
Yeah.
Now,
Yes.
I have heard Barbara tell me all of her plans about the Folk Festival. And on the last show, Alysia said she was going to the Folk Festival, and I didn't have any time to go back and ask her what her plans are. But what are your plans for the Folk Festival, Alysia?
My plans are to just go out there and see what we can see. I would like to see if we can find evidence of Bigfoot or Sasquatch. There's a lot of stories about it, so I'd like to put my eyes on it.
Okay. Now, there's one thing that I did find in doing my research about the folk monster, 3 toes. Any comments about that?
I have none.
None at all? Well,
None at all.
Well, let me try to
I'll
draw
let you
this
know,
out.
though, Matt.
Well, why would Bigfoot have 5 toes and the folk monster only have 3? No speculation.
I have a speculation. So sloths hang from trees. They have 3 toes. Maybe it's a derivative of other Sasquatches, and maybe they hang from trees when they want to have fun or are really tired.
Maybe. What about this little piggy went to the market? You think that might come into play here, and maybe one didn't go all the way all the way home? All right. Well, it's something I'm sure you guys will look into in your inquest into the folk monster when you're down there. So, Alysia, are you going to be hanging out with Barbara when you're down there, or are you going to stick close together?
Barbara is going to pick me up from my house. I live about an hour away from it.
Okay. So you're all going to be hanging out in the same tent and same squad and all that when you're down there?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, we are.
Okay. So if one goes, I'll go.
Right.
If
Right.
the folk monster gets you, then he gets all of you. Okay. All right. Well, Alysia, what my advice to you is, I would make sure that you sleep at night with your shoes on and hide Barbara's. So that might be something to consider. So anyway, it goes back to I don't have to outrun it. I just have to outrun you. That kind of. So, all right. Well, all right. Anything else to add about the folk festival? Barbara, are you going to be doing some reports from there?
Yes, I'm going to try, depending on cell phone service. Yes.
Okay. So, yeah, we'll have to try to work that out. It would be nice if we could actually get a live report for the or I guess it wouldn't be live, but if we could do a couple of your reports for the podcast or whatever. But I'm sure when people see you, I want to make note of, if you saw the last podcast, I mean, these ladies are absolutely gorgeous, but they really went all out for this one. So I just want people, if you're watching on YouTube, to notice what lovely ladies we have on this podcast. And I'm very honored to have you both on here. And you both look great today.
Well, thank you, Matt.
Well, you're welcome. So let us move on. And that could also fall into a subtle plug for watching this podcast on YouTube. All right, now let's talk about last time on the feedback. Alysia, do you want to talk about that a little bit, or do you want me to lead off?
Oh, I can talk about it.
Okay.
So sometimes when I'm talking to somebody, I can sometimes hear a spirit through the phone or through the microphone. And spirits have a tendency to kind of mess with electronics. So whereas it might have been your AirPods, it might also have been a spirit that's trying to communicate to us. And
because that happens to us a lot.
Yeah, I've caught EVPs just talking to Barbara over the phone.
So can you elaborate on that?
Like, do you want to know what kind of EVPs that we have gotten?
What EVP, is that what you're saying?
It's electronic voice. I'm trying to think of the last word.
I think it's like projection or something.
Phenomenon. It's electronic voice phenomenon.
Okay.
Right.
I had to think about it for a second.
Okay, and I just want to preface this before we go any farther, is that in the last podcast, the podcast about the Skinwalker Ranch, we had just a horrible amount of feedback, and I was wearing ear pods, and it was we attributed a lot to the ear pods, but there were noises in there that if you listen to the podcast, it sounds like an insect almost. And that's not. And it went off like 2 or 3 times. It sounded like almost like a dentist drill, or like a moth or a hummingbird's wings, just really flapping. So there were some really strange sounds in there that almost didn't sound electronic. So I would attribute a lot to just feedback.
Can we also remember that Beak is a avian, so he's bird-like. So if you heard things that were like feathers flapping or something, it may have been Beak just.
Okay. And yeah, going back to that last podcast, we talked to 2 entities. One was Ishtar and one was Beak. And it certainly sounded like a drill or a hummingbird's wings flapping or something just moving just ultra fast. So any ideas, Barbara?
Well, we tend to get feedback like that quite a bit. And I was hearing, on top of what you were hearing, I was hearing voices. That's why I kept on looking up, because I kept on hearing voices all around me. And I was trying to make out what they were saying, but I couldn't. Okay.
All right. Well, that is very interesting. And I guess we'll leave that to the unsolved. We happened to solve our technical issue. And even now, though, I still hear, I don't know if you guys can hear it, but I still have, like, every 5 seconds, there's a slight, a slight feedback. I don't know what that is. I don't know if you can hear that. Okay, so if you want to listen to that podcast, go back. It is the Dogman. It's the Skinwalker Ranch podcast, and if you can, it's actually very fascinating. And we got a lot of really good feedback, and it's something that is really out there. So, I guess, Barbara, you want to talk about our upcoming subject on Egypt?
Well, we're going to be talking about Egypt, the ley lines, mostly the ancient alien, story that goes along with Egypt and the pyramids.
Okay, yeah, and the reason that we're doing this, the reason that we're talking about Egypt on Encounters USA is because it all has a beginning. And right now, we really want to talk about the beginning, and we touched on this in our podcast about Dogman, where we talked about the Egyptian god Anubis. But today, very quickly, we're going to talk about the pyramids. What we know about them. Barbara has some information she wants to relate about them. I was in Egypt and had somewhat of an encounter, and Alysia is going to talk to us about the Lemurians. So, Alysia, do you want to tell us a little bit about the Lemurian culture, and are they connected to Atlantis?
Okay, so Lemurians were a race. Lemuria is supposedly a place where before Atlantis, and it ended up sinking into the sea, into the ocean. And the people there have been seen in several accounts dating back to the 1800s. And I believe that I had a past life in Lemuria, so I believe that they're out there.
Barbara, you want to add to that?
Well, yeah, Lemurians are supposedly inside of Mount Shasta, which is in California. And from what I gather, they make appearances frequently in different locations around Mount Shasta. They've actually been in stores purchasing things like salt, sulfur, and lard, and they pay with gold nuggets. So this is just some of the lore that I was researching. There's also been people that have had encounters where they have been taken inside the mountain and they've seen the city inside the mountain, supposedly. And there was actually a book written about it from a boy that was, I think he was in the 1800s, late 1800s, maybe even early 1800s. I can't recall off the top of my head, but he did automatic writing, and it was said that the Lemurians chose him and were speaking through him, and he automatically wrote this book. And it was basically their history.
All right. So what I'm trying to get at, but the Lemurians they're not around anymore. I mean, and Alysia said that they predated the Atlanteans. That's something new. I hadn't heard that before. That's correct?
Well, for the people in California say they still are there inside the mountain of Mount Shasta.
Okay. And right. I've seen accounts up to 1999. I've seen an account from 2015. So they're still there.
Okay. Well, I have some. I have some interesting stories to tell. My wife and I went down to Mount Shasta about, I guess it was 2 years ago. And so when we do our podcast on Mount Shasta, I'll definitely talk about the Lemurians. But what I'm looking for is what they would call an antediluvian, a pre-Egypt civilization. And we've pinpointed the Lemurians. And what about the Atlanteans? Barbara, you know a lot about the Atlanteans, right?
Well, the Atlanteans, we haven't found the ruins of Atlantis yet. There's been many theories. One of them is that it's in Africa, which I just watched something about that recently. And they're saying that it is, I can't remember what the place is called, but it's circular. You can see it from Google Earth, and it's circular in manner. And it looks like Atlantis did. So to me, that is probably the most accurate that I've seen as far as where it might be. Atlantis isn't an ancient civilization that is supposed to have existed way back when. And they were a highly technological race. They used crystals. Everything was highly advanced. And then a great catastrophe happened and they were washed away. But it is said that some of them escaped and went to Egypt, and some stayed in the surrounding area, which if it was Africa, you know, that would explain a lot of the stuff that what I just recently watched happen. So I'm pretty sure that's where the Atlantis Egypt connection comes in, that some of them went to Egypt and helped with the construction of the pyramids and so forth.
Okay. And anything to add to that, Alysia?
I also believe that the Lemurians might have helped with the building and the construction. I believe that a little bit further east of Egypt is, you know, the Middle East, and I believe Anunnaki probably had a good hand in helping the Egyptians build their pyramids and get everything together.
Okay, so now I think our discussion is gonna first of all, let's look at Atlantis academically, and then we're gonna remote view Atlantis and Egypt and see if the remote viewers' notes compare with your guys's and with my own. So if you and you know, one thing about Atlantis that really bothers me is that you see all these shows about Atlantis is off in the Aegean somewhere, and it's just preposterous because whoever wrote that, you know, documentary didn't read Plato's account. And so in Plato's account, and I specifically included it in my book Deceptions of the Ages, because I want people to see the account, what it says. And Barbara, you said that these people, the Atlanteans, were a technologically advanced civilization. According to Plato, and Plato, this is Socrates speaking in Plato, says that their information came from Solon, who is another guy, but he says that the Egyptians gave him information that 9,000 years prior to their time, prior to Solon's time, not Socrates and Plato, that there was this Atlantean civilization. They flew, they came in ships, and they were destroying people, and they were going to destroy Egypt. And the Egyptians say that the Greeks and the Egyptians combined and fought them. And something happened, like you said, Barbara. They had a disaster, and they ended up just, you know, well, there's no home to go back to. So the theory is that they stayed and they built the Egyptian civilization. Is that correct? Are we agreed on that?
Yes, I'm pretty sure.
Okay.
I would say that there were rogue Atlanteans, because not all Atlanteans wanted to take over the world.
Yeah,
right.
I agree with that. Because some of them, the ones that left were the ones that wanted to help the world. That's what I believe. Right.
Well, when you get into Plato's account, then it kind of drops off from there. You end up, you know, the Atlanteans were defeated, and they live somewhere out, and they absolutely describe a series of concentric circles that led to I guess their headquarters, their capital. But it was out off of the Pillars of Heracles, and or Hercules, whatever it was, and it's actually in the Azores. It's off the Azores, which fits it perfectly. And also, you have to take into the geology. What happened 9,000 years ago or 11,000 years ago was a massive ice sheet melted off of the Newfoundland, Canada, North America. It melted and raised the sea levels 450 feet. So there would have been, you know, without all the crystals and all that, there was catastrophic change happening back before the Egyptian, you know, before 10,000 years BC. So,
and that would also explain why they went into the ocean. The ice was melted and they were flooded completely.
Right. So that's science, that's geology, and that's history, and you can read that all in Plato's Dialogues, or you can read it in Deceptions of the Ages, where I put it word for word in my book, because it's very important. People who talk about Atlantis, that they know what they're talking about. So the next thing I want to talk about.
Well, I remembered the name of the place that I just recently saw that they thought Atlantis was located, and that's the Eye of the Sahara. And that was, if you look at the Eye of Sahara, it looks exactly the way Atlantis would have looked if it was still with us today.
Yes,
So it's very interesting.
I think I saw that, and it has the concentric rings around it.
Yes.
So
yes.
It does.
And it's also located near the ocean, so it would have had that access to the ocean.
All right, so we're talking about the Egyptian culture. So we've established there's an Atlantis connection. So it's since we don't know from history, it is my belief that the Atlanteans had secret societies that they just transferred into Egypt, and that they had these societies had knowledge that gave them power, and that these people took control in Egypt. And that's as far as I'm going to go. Barbara, I know you have some ideas about the people that founded Egypt and the people who built the pyramids. So you want to talk about that?
Okay, well, it's not so much a theory. I actually, well, I mean, it is a theory. I had a vision in my dreams of the pyramids, and the tops were levitating up, and there was a stream of light emitting from them. And I heard something say that they were some sort of power source, or something that a form of communication. And so I was watching a documentary afterwards because I was really interested in what I had seen in my dream. And I saw a picture, and I sent it to Matt just about, what was it, a couple days ago. And it looks like an outlet, like you plug something into. And so if you go into the ancient alien theories that the aliens helped build the pyramids, who's to say that wasn't like a charging source for their craft, or something that emitted enough energy to help them do the things that they needed to build the pyramids as well? So, I mean, that would coincide with what I saw in my vision in my dream. That's just, so I guess you would say it's a theory.
Okay, before we get Alysia on here, if you're watching this on the YouTube podcast, then I will have a picture of this, what Barbara's talking about. So Alysia, any input on that?
She told me about that when she had watched it, and I had a vision beforehand about, I don't know, a couple days before, about the pyramids as well. And as I saw it, I saw like the pyramids, like one pyramid and then another pyramid, and they would go up together and start spinning, like what we call a Merkaba, you know, the star that's 12-sided, and started spinning and moving into another direction. I think that not only was a charging source, but it might have been a source of travel in some way.
So Alysia, can you talk about your Merkaba again? What is that? What's the shape? Can you describe the shape?
I can show you the shape. I have one.
In the Bible, a Merkaba is a chariot.
Well, I mean, is it a pyramid on top of a pyramid?
Basically, this is what a Merkaba looks like.
Okay, so I was talking to Barbara about this. When I was I wasn't in the the Great Pyramid. I was in the second biggest one, and it was in December, right? It's like December 31st. It is freezing. It's the high desert. It's freezing in Egypt. And you got inside that pyramid, and unfortunately, it's a long story, but I have no pictures to show for this. But I got inside that pyramid and just dripping with sweat. It was so humid. It was so muggy in there. So how is it so freezing cold outside and it is so hot inside that pyramid? Except that pyramid extends down to where there's heat, right? Coming out of the earth.
So it's kind of like a microwave effect.
Yeah,
Right.
I think that, like Alicia's saying, I think it's a pyramid. It could be a pyramid on top of another pyramid. And that's why it's drawing up all that energy. And then,
And if it's all
Barbara,
that
you and I
energy,
talked
it could
about,
be a source of power, right?
yeah.
Right.
Well, okay, so we're going to talk about that in a second, but you and I were talking about I'm showing this object on the YouTube channel, but this stone, it has two. I've seen this before, and Graham Hancock did this they put a ROV into one of the pyramids, and it ran up against this thing. And what it was, it's this, but it's not this particular one, but it's two bars, iron bars that are basically like rebar that protrude out and they're bent down. And that is supposedly to keep that from slipping, right? I don't know what the function is. Now, in the one that Graham Hancock shows, there's no hole in the bottom. Now, we're talking about that, and I don't agree that has anything to do with electricity. But before I go down that road, and I don't know what they're for, but to me it seems like they're good for dragging. Their handles to drag that stone, or they're to keep it in place. And they have staples where they connect blocks together to keep them from shifting around. Now, when I was in the Valley of the Kings, one thing I noticed when I went into all these different kings' chambers, when you look at the top of the chamber, there are these elaborate paintings, right? Where's the soot? And that's the first thing I said. Where's the soot? And they said, oh, no soot. I said, well, how is there no soot? How did they see in here? How do you paint those elaborate things? And then I never saw any Egyptologist ever say anything about that until I started publicly asking, where's the soot from the torches that they did? I didn't have any ideas about electricity, but I said, there's no way they could have built these or painted these elaborate things in here without, some kind of light, and it didn't come from a fire. So that's my input on that.
In the sun, and then move them into the pyramid.
What's
By mirrors,
that?
right?
I'm sorry.
Right.
Well, okay, so let's, Alysia, I didn't hear that. Before I talk about remote viewing, can I hear that again?
I said, what if they use the sun to paint, like with mirrors or something? So paint it and then put it into the pyramid.
I'm not talking about the pyramid. That's a whole nother ball of wax. I'm talking about, there's no paintings in the pyramid. In the king's tombs, there are all of these Egyptian elaborately painted, all these different colors, and the predominant color is white, the background. Those are all in the king's tombs, and that there's no sun there. That you have to go way, way down into a cavern that was dug out. So where did the light come from for that? And it was just interesting. I thought nobody ever asked where the smoke is, but then when I started asking, then people started asking that question. So
I think what Alysia was saying is if they had mirrors back then, or any sort of thing like a mirror, they could have been positioned in a certain way to get the sunlight from outside to inside.
Right.
It's not. I mean, I won't say it's impossible, but you'd have to have supercomputers adjusting sunlight, mirrors, rotating. You're talking about the tombs themselves. go 50, sometimes up to 50 yards. And they start out, you have to climb into things, into caverns and stuff. So, and then not to mention the corners and all the elaborate construction. It would be so difficult. I don't want to say it's impossible, but definitely.
Well, I mean, they say that building the pyramids looks impossible. So what's to say that wasn't impossible, right?
It's just too difficult to carve. I mean, they're not carvings; they're little paintings. Some of them are like 8 inches. I mean, but there's hundreds of them. So how are you going to get that kind of detail? Anyway, but yeah, that's sure you can have that theory, but when we were talking about them possibly using electricity, then here's the next thing. So let's talk about remote viewing. Alysia, what do you think about remote viewing?
I've done it, so it's possible. That's how I feel about it.
Okay. And Barbara?
What do I think about remote view?
Yeah.
Remote viewing? I think it's possible. I know there's very highly skilled remote viewers in the world. Mm-hmm. And I know 2 of them actually were given the Great Pyramid as a example to use like a target. And one of them was from the United States and one of them was from the UK. And I actually, what they came up with was pretty astonishing.
Okay, well, that's what I wanted to touch on next, is that I, on my podcast, Books in Hindsight, I had the pleasure, the honor of interviewing Major Ed Dames, who was the head of the Army's remote viewing project. And he trained Dr. Brown, anyway, that's the Farsight Institute. And I don't want to say his first name. But anyway, Dr. Brown of the Farsight Institute has a number of remote viewers that he tasked to remote view Atlantis and remote view the construction of the pyramids. And I'll leave a link in the description, because whenever especially after talking to Major Dames, whenever it comes to me wanting to find out something, I always go to the remote viewers if I have a question. And so their description of the building of the pyramids has a lot to do with electricity. So do you have anything to, like, why were the pyramids built, Barbara or Alysia? Do you have any?
Well, no one really knows exactly. No one exactly knows why they were built. The theory is that they were tombs, but that's,
Okay. Well,
I don't specifically believe that. And with the remote viewers, they said that these pyramids were built with something sort of like the atomic bomb, something like that. There was a big explosion where it affected the earth in a way to where they could get these big stones. And then they also had these lower life forms that they used, almost like robots, that he remote viewed as far as the workers went, and mantid type beings. But it was weird because he wasn't the only one that had these remote views. The other guy, that was the guy in the U.S., and the guy in the UK had something similar and was talking about similar things. So it was like they both had the same type of remote view, and they didn't talk to each other. They both had the same target, but it was separate. So that was interesting.
Yeah. Have you had a chance to see that, Alysia?
I haven't seen all of that, but I've seen a picture where I can kind of see one of the praying mantis looking things. I can see it in the picture.
Is that the one I sent you? The screenshot I sent you?
Sent me. Yeah. And then I had dreams about it that night, so thanks.
I'll have to send that to you, Matt. I screenshotted a pyramid in that video, and in that video I can see a being on the pyramid. I'll send it to you and see if you can see it.
Was it this mantis?
It looks like it, yeah. It
Okay.
looks like what he drew.
Okay. Yeah, and so for people that are listening that aren't aware, please go and look at, it's Courtney Brown. I'm sorry, Courtney, but look at the Farsight Institute. And what they viewed was a bunch of, like Barbara said, like these beings that were bred. They were lower life forms. They were just able to do the work. They didn't last very long because they couldn't handle the toxic conditions. And the people responsible were like these praying mantis, and he said it was like a mother, a caregiver figure, and Dick Algier was the one who said that when he remote viewed her, she basically said, "You don't belong here, so move along." And he said, "I had no choice; I had to do that." So very interesting, and the whole point behind them building the pyramid was and like the atomic bomb is a very interesting comparison, because it was like a Manhattan Project. It was something where everybody agreed, if we do this and work with these entities, we'll have electricity. And so everybody was into it. And I guess it was a lot of hard work, and according to the remote viewers, but they established the pyramids. And so unless you guys want to add anything else, I'd like to ask you to start talking about ley lines. And why would the pyramids be there?
Okay, so ley lines are the grid of the earth, okay? And where the ley lines meet is called a nodule. And most of these sacred sites, like Mount Shasta and Egypt and Göbekli Tepe and a bunch of other different sites, Stonehenge, just to name a few, are on these nodules where the ley lines meet. And so it also corresponds with the alien activity. The alien activity seems to correlate with these sacred sites in the nodules where the ley lines meet.
But Barbara, I've heard ley line, but what is it? I don't understand. What good does it do me or anybody that uses it?
Well, the Earth's grid, from what I understand, has energy. So the ley lines, even though typical people can't feel them, but some people can. Like I can feel when I walk into a house and feel if it's haunted or not. I can feel if it's I can feel portals. So I can feel the energy of things. So ley lines are the energy of the earth. It's like a grid. And the nodules are where the grid meets in point, like in all the different ley lines meet at a point. And that's where all these sacred sites have been built, which isn't a coincidence. I don't think anything's a coincidence. And I think that's why a lot of these places have energy, and a lot of these beings are attracted to these points.
So what kind of energy is coming out? Is it electromagnetic energy that's coming out of them?
I don't think so. I think it's a different type of energy. I think that maybe the earth is alive with energy, just like we are alive with energy, like we're all connected energetically.
Alysia, did you want to say something?
There's like the human consciousness grid, and then there's the Earth's grid.
I believe that we're all connected. Let's even bring it further. Plants are alive, animals, plants, and on the ley lines and like the hotspots, like in Egypt and in those areas, there's a lot of activity because it's old. There's history there, and we're finding out there's more and more history in these areas, and they're ancient areas, so there's a lot going on, and maybe some of what we're feeling is some of the past, and maybe some of what we're feeling may be in the future. If time is isn't a construct in like if time isn't really anything but a construct, then time doesn't exist, and we can see through past and present and future. And maybe that's what we're getting, and that's what the energy is coming from. We're getting all of it at one point.
Okay, because if what you're saying then is that, and that kind of makes sense, because if you go E equals MC squared, then if these ley lines have energy, then that could explain why people would use them. And we're going to go back to this word again, as portals. Because they, if they are energy, then obviously you can manipulate time and space through them. And that's just basic Einstein physics. So, all right. But yeah, and and thanks for bringing that up, but we have a whole bunch of shows coming about Cydonia. I think we'll probably be hitting on Skinwalker Ranch again. We're going to be hitting on Bridgewater Triangle. We're going to be hitting on the Hudson Valley and Washington State. So we're going to be talking about all of those places. So ley lines, are they there?
Ley lines, if you think about it, if the ley lines are energy, like we're talking about right now, and they all meet at these points, right? Those points, those nodules where the sacred sites are, they have the most energy because they have ley lines all connected to one point. So many, many different ley lines connected at one point, right? So that's the center.
That's an example.
So like the nucleus of everything is that nodule. So that's why there's so much energy in that one point. And that's why they have enough energy for, say, a portal or what have you.
Close to where I live, there's a ley line. There's 3 ley lines going one way, one going this way, and one going like, and they all meet in this one place about 45 minutes from where I live. And there's so much activity there. Wow. And on top of that, I live near a Air Force base, and there's a lot of activity because of that with extraterrestrials and spirit activity, and you have Bigfoot activity and all of that, and that's a possibility because it's on like 3 ley lines.
Right.
And that's exactly what we're trying to pin down, and thank you guys for doing that. But that's what we're really trying to focus on these upcoming shows is we want to find the convergent spots of UFOs, Bigfoot, and Dogman. And if they all coincide to ley lines, then there is something there, because we're trying to pin down all the things, like where do they come from and what they're doing here. So amazing. All right. So the next thing that I want to talk to you guys about is, and I had an encounter I'd like to get to before too long, but very quickly, let's talk a little bit about the golden mean. Do you guys know anything about that? Or the golden ratio?
I know a little bit. I haven't studied it enough. I'm not really a math person, but I know a little bit.
Okay, well, basically the golden ratio is this. It's 1.6 to 1. And if you stand up and put your hands down by your side, your body is a 1.6 to 1. When you look at a snail shell, it develops at the ratio of 1.6 to 1. This is the golden mean.
Are you talking?
And this is something that I talk about this again. I'm going to have to go back to my book because I threw everything but the kitchen sink in this book. But they actually did experiments with sound and vibrations at certain frequencies that corresponded with the golden mean. And they found the atoms lined up and just all kinds of magical things happened when you start to do things at that ratio of 1.6 to 1. So, and it's Fibonacci stuff, and it's in...
it goes into sacred geometry, right?
Exactly. So when you're looking at the pyramid, if you go from the top to the center, there's a hole about it's not all the way, it's not halfway down, but if you break up the pyramid, it's all 1.6 to 1. It's all the golden mean. And so that, if you look at Leonardo da Vinci and his man, painting, whatever that was, that's all pointing out that ratio of 1.6 to 1. So I think that's another thing, because I've heard Barbara talk about vibrations, and I think you talked about vibrations as well. So you guys obviously you need to do your homework on the golden mean, but what are your feelings about vibrations and the ley lines?
I believe that the ley lines are vibrating at a different frequency than the Earth normally vibrates at. Okay. So, and if you go into these spots, and I'm using Oblekli Tepley because it's the one I know the best. You go into that, it's like a dome, and you use a tuning fork. You can get a vibration, and it's soothing. People will use binaural beats for that same soothing effect. I think that's where the ley lines are vibrating at.
Barbara, anything?
Yes. Well, I think that the ley lines have vibrations, yes. And I think that, people like Nikola Tesla, he tapped into the grid for various reasons. And he also tapped into the atmospheric grid, which is outside the, Earth. So, and that he wanted to use that as free energy. So I believe that, yes, there is a certain type of vibration or energy that's there. Yeah.
And if you take a Tesla pole and you put like a globe around it and put lights where those ley lines meet, and you flip it on, it'll make those lights turn on.
Light out, yes.
Right.
Right.
Can you do that? You live by one, right? That would be awesome to see.
I would have to find somebody with a Tesla pole, but I could give it a shot.
Great. Yeah, well, maybe there's some up here where I live. All right. So that is just fascinating, actually, to know. But I have to know this. A simple mind, I need to see a picture in my mind of the ley line. So when I hear you talk about it, the first thing I think of is a longitude line. Is it that?
No, it's more like a grid. There's an actual grid.
So longitude and latitude lines.
Well,
all right. Well, let me throw this at you. Do you know what a neuron, one of your brain cells, looks like?
Right.
Is that it? Is it a bunch of different like axons and neurons, or is it just one or two? How many connections?
Many connections. If you look at sacred geometry and you see the flower of life, I think it looks more like that all over the earth.
Okay, that explains a lot. All right.
They're like longitude and latitude lines because in the sense that we can't see them.
Right.
So, okay. I think this is common sense, but I'm trying to trap you guys into a three-dimensional image, almost two-dimensional. But when you're talking about a ley line, especially a junction, we're talking about not three-dimensional, but it's got to be higher dimensional, yes? I mean, it's got to cross all dimensions.
No. I would say it's across all space and time. So, because it's not going anywhere.
I believe them to be like spiritual energy pathways.
Right.
So it's
Are you saying spiritual energy is higher dimension? Is not
Yes.
three-dimensional?
Yes,
Okay.
it's not three-dimensional.
Okay.
We're three-dimensional. And most humans aren't in the spiritual, they're not high enough spiritually to vibrate at that level.
Okay. Now this is not for my benefit, and this is not to give you a headache. This is for the people that are listening, and we're all trying to make sense of this. So at these portals, let's say it's a 7-Eleven, and I go inside. What am I going to find in the portal? I think we said there's electromagnetic energy. You said there is spiritual energy. What else is there?
Well, you said there was electrical magnetic energy.
Okay.
Where I think there's more spiritual energy. I think it's a more spiritual energy thing.
Okay. Then why are these UFOs attracted to them?
I think it's like a beacon.
Yeah, because they vibrate at just as high of a frequency as we do. They are multidimensional, and so I think that's why.
Okay. Okay, so are vibrations energy in and of themselves?
Yes.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, so somebody can hit me with a vibration, and that will affect me.
If you hear a sound loud enough, it would affect you.
Okay.
Right? So you hear a sound really loud and someone blows an air horn in your ear, you're going to be deaf for a couple hours.
Okay.
It's vibrational energy, it works much the same way. I don't think it's going to hit you over the head, but it's able to bring your spirit higher. And be honest with you, we really don't know what a spirit is. We just know that we have it.
And if you ever watch these podcasts on, say, like the secret space program, they actually have what they call super soldiers that use remote viewing and can actually use their consciousness to emit an energy that's like a weapon, and they can actually kill someone. So, I mean, that's one of the things that they talk about. So I do believe that, yeah, the vibration can be used.
Well, that's interesting you bring that up. And I always, having been in the military, my idea of a super soldier was the guy who got out. So, but anyway, I hear about these super soldiers. And have you guys seen the men? I don't think Barbara's seen it. The Men Who Stare at Goats.
I haven't.
I have not watched that movie.
You guys, okay, so Ed Dames, the guy that I interviewed, and I'm going to get him on this podcast. I'm sure he'll do it. But he was one of the guys who, he's not the guy who killed the goat, but guys that he worked with. And I guess this will just kind of lead into my story that's coming up. But in 1983, when they were doing the stuff at Fort Bragg, I was in training for the Special Forces Q course, so all this stuff was actually happening right around the same time that I was there, and so like Ed Dames was there, and it was pretty weird. So it was like one of those small world kind of things. So, ladies, we're gonna have to kind of cut this podcast a little bit short, but I have an encounter that I want to talk about today. This is not a Bigfoot. It's not Dogman. It is an actual UFO encounter that happened in Egypt. And it didn't actually happen to me, but I'd like to talk about it. Do you guys mind if I take a couple minutes?
No, go right ahead.
Are you excited about this?
Yeah, super excited.
Okay. Well, if you're watching on YouTube, I see that. Now the camera's on you, Barbara, so you better wipe that smug smile off of your face, that hidden sarcasm. Okay, so let me give you the backstory on this. I was in Egypt in 1985, part of the peacekeeping force, part of the 82nd Airborne. And if you're watching on YouTube, you can see the pictures that I'll be flashing here or there. But anyway, so At one point, we're there on a 6-month tour, and at one point they picked me to be in like this decathlon event, and we were competing against these other countries that were in the forest. But the Americans had the South Camp, what's called South Camp, which is the southern tip of the Sinai, where Sharm el Sheikh is today. And someplace in the north, I don't know exactly where it was what they called North Camp, and that was all the other contingents. Now, the reason the Americans are alone is because we were ready to fight anybody who tried to cross the desert and attack Israel or vice versa. So we were picked for this team, and we went up to the place about March 3rd, and I'm just going to read you this encounter. And it's not the encounter itself, or not my encounter. It's what happened when we got there to the base camp. People were really freaked out, and we were like they didn't have Americans there, so they said, "Oh yes, well we had this UFO came down last night, and it sat outside the camp, and we all had to they went on alert, and they were told not to fire on this UFO." So I'm going to tell you about the encounter. So it says lights in the sky, and if you're watching on YouTube, you can see this, see the pictures. El Gora, as we all know, was built upon the remains of an Israeli airfield. But how many people know the ancient history of El Gora? Few, perhaps, because of the sensitive nature of the area. Unfortunately, the true stories of some of the unusual occurrences that have taken place in the area are seldom heard. However, on Sunday, March 3rd, several members of the Colombian Battalion saw evidence of ancient links the area has with an alien civilization. Now, this is in a UN document, so I'm showing you the picture. This is a UN document. It's official. At 21:05 hours, as the guards settled down for another quiet night in the watchtowers, the sentries along the southern fence became aware of a quiet humming in the air. At first, they paid little attention to it, but after it had been growing steadily louder for 10 minutes, they noticed a series of orange lights hovering beyond the southern fence. The sound was too quiet to be helicopters, and the lights too close together for aircraft. The lights were grouped together in the groups of 6, a total of 3 groups in all. They always moved in an east to west direction for 2 minutes before returning, always moving at the same slow pace, but occasionally disappearing behind the sand dunes out in the desert. After the lights had been visible for some 10 to 15 minutes, they suddenly disappeared from sight. One moment they were hovering about 2 miles from the camp, and the next moment they were rising rapidly, moving faster and faster, straight up into the clear night. Within a matter of seconds, they were lost to sight amongst the stars. All right, so the story goes on to talk about the history of the Sinai Desert and encounters in the Sinai in Egypt. And so that was basically the encounter. But when I got there and I talked to these, I met up with these Fijian guys, and these guys are like Samoans. They're all pretty strong, burly guys. And they said they were pretty freaked out by it. And the one thing that they remembered was they said not to fire on it, and that was the first thing they wanted to do when they got into their position. So that was an encounter, and this is an official document, and nobody tried to cover it up or anything. So that's probably as close to an encounter as I've actually ever had in my time. So any thoughts about this, ladies? Any comment?
That's interesting. I mean, did they describe anything about the sky lighting up or anything else like that with your typical encounter, or no?
No, basically what it was that, like the Fijians, the Colombians were on guard, and the Fijians were watching TV or whatever you do, drinking whatever, and then there's a camp alert, so they didn't see anything. They just had to grab their weapons and go hit their foxholes. So they hadn't seen anything, but they're pretty scared by aliens, I guess. So anyway, I taught them how to play the beer hunter. So you know how to play that?
No, I don't even think I know what that is.
You shake up one beer and you put it back in the 6-pack, and then you have the guy open a beer next to his head. So, and then if he gets the one that's shaken up, then he gets that. Thought it was great fun. So Fijians are a lot of fun.
With beer.
I got invited to their grog festival. I don't know what that stuff is, but I couldn't move the next day.
Grog, they do the grog at military balls, and they pour pretty much everything and anything in that thing.
Oh no, this isn't Fijian grog. It's made from some root, and they said don't. I think it's like got opium in it or something. I couldn't move the next day, but I got invited to this. Got invited to this. Actually, don't know why I'm talking about this, but got invited to this Fijian festival where all these big burly Samoan type guys are wearing dresses. And it was funny at first till they said, "Where's yours?" Well, get me one. And so I ended up with a dress myself. So pretty fun. But then I taught them how to bunny hop. So Matt Hines spreading American culture throughout the world.
Yeah.
So, all right. Well, I think that do we have anything else that we should cover before we wrap up this podcast?
No, I think we pretty much covered the gist of what we needed to cover.
Yeah. Right. Well, Alysia, do you have anything else to add about UFOs in Egypt or ley lines or?
If you'd like, I'd like to get a message out to the collective. I got one from my guides earlier in the week.
Yes, say it, yes.
Okay. So, real quick, Beak wanted to say thank you for having him on your podcast. And he told me that while everything is in flux, to remember to stay centered and stay true to yourself, because that is the only way that we're going to move forward. So stay centered and stay true to yourself and keep moving forward so that we can raise our vibrations and ascend and go up. So that's all I got.
Thank you. Wow. All right. Now, Alysia, I don't know what your plans are, but I have to tell people in the podcast before we started today, I had upset these two to no end because we had talked about, Barbara and I had talked about Egypt. And I told Alysia we were going to talk about Mount Shasta. So, Alysia, I don't know what your availability is. I don't think we're going to do a podcast on Tuesday because I think Barbara's going to be, is that next Tuesday, Barbara? Are you here next Tuesday? No, it's Memorial Day.
Memorial Day is Monday.
Is Wednesday? Are we going to do a podcast on Tuesday?
I'm good to do a podcast on Tuesday.
Yeah.
Are you doing this podcast on Tuesday?
Yeah, Tuesday should be good for me.
I'm talking to Alysia.
Oh,
okay.
Yeah,
you're doing
I can.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to say is that because Alysia went and got a lot of information. We're going to be talking about Mount Shasta next time, and actually visited there, went into Plato's cave. I want to talk about some remote viewing stuff. So, okay. Alysia, if you'll come back. But I don't know if we're going to do it. Will we do it on Tuesday, Barbara?
Yes, it's okay. Not until Tuesday the 12th that we're going to be. No, it's the 11th. Tuesday 11th, I'll be gone.
Okay, so next Tuesday is fine.
Next Tuesday, perfect.
Okay, so next Tuesday it's Mount Shasta, and that's going to be a great one because we're going to be talking about the Lemurians. I went down to Mount Shasta and actually did a story on this missing skier, and that's really bizarre. So we're going to throw some David Paulides into this, and we're going to be talking about hotspots and possibly more ley lines.
Awesome.
And portals.
Sounds good.
All righty.
All right. So are you gonna tell everybody to subscribe, Barbara?
Yes, please subscribe and like our podcast. We'd appreciate it.
Yes, please
Hit
do.
like and subscribe.
Yes, please do. And don't forget to watch this podcast on YouTube if you're listening to it on iTunes or Spotify or iHeartRadio. Alysia, again, thank you for being on our podcast. Alysia, what's your
Thank
Facebook?
you.
What's your Facebook?
Okay, so my Facebook is www.facebook.com/Miss Alysia Elf. It's spelled Miss ALISHAF. You can also reach me on Instagram at Raven Deloon, and all my contact info is on my Facebook. And thank y'all again for having me. I look forward to doing this again Tuesday.
Yes. Well, we're looking forward to having you back, Alysia. You're a great addition to the podcast, and I know Barbara does too, enjoys your inputs and your insights. Wow.
Thank you.
All right. Well, I think with that, are you going to, have you got the exit down yet, Barbara? Do you want to take it away?
The exit. Which exit?
When we're watching our...
Oh. Yes.
All right. You want to do it?
No, you can do it. I'm good.
All right. Well, for Alysia Farmer and for Barbara and for Matt, enjoy yourself out there. Enjoy your encounters. But please, if you're out in the woods, watch your back. Yeah, I didn't even ask anybody to do it this time. Thanks for listening to tonight's show. Please remember, if you've had an encounter, we want to hear about it. Go ahead and email us at encountersusa1@gmail.com or contact us at encountersusa.com, our website, and go to the contact form. All right, everybody. Until next time, be careful out there. And if you're out in the woods, watch your back.